Hi guys, welcome back to Still. As you guys know, I'm one of your hosts, Brandon, and this is,
Sierra.
and we are the new, not so new, but new novices to the world of YouTube and podcasting, where we talk about digital distance, conversating, being in the real world, what's your actual real voice, and this season is literally about multiple voices, community. Sierra and I've had a really good, I would say, good conversation and journey around that whole thought process. But we had a great call or great conversation or call because we're not in the same state about individuality and conformity, and then that presented another question. But we were like, this is way too heavy. Let's shift gears. So today we're going to shift gears. We're going to talk about actually when I was visiting home when me and Sierra got to see each other. Um, we brought up this topic, and then the keyword came through, and it was bigotry, plain and simple, bigotry. And of course, you guys all know me. I didn't really have the full definition clarified. So as I was trying to make my point, Sierra gladly and grammatically and educationally gave me a deeper understanding of what that was. But in the same thought process, I didn't realize how multifaceted that word, that definition, that characteristic can be attached to all the meanings of our lives. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. And of course, it's going to be about the essence of how this affects a community or group basis. But I think the conversation as we've started this whole season around community is you got to check in with yourself first before you kind of can engage and become a part of a massive demographic or thought or movement. So, I mean, let's start. I mean, what do you think, bigotry? Like you brought this up when we were off air. So where do you stand?
Bigotry. So I'm going to just go over to a definition I pulled earlier. And excuse me, guys, if I'm looking away from the camera. Split screening over here with my giant monitor. So I've got a program up to keep track of our thoughts here. So there's like the definition you get with like Oxford or Webster, right?
Yeah.
The way that I would put it in my own words is a bigot is somebody who has some kind of prejudice or not logical viewpoint that is not supported in fact, and they choose to believe it regardless of how much evidence is shown to them that proves their belief wrong. That's kind of the way that when I hear that word, that's what I think. And who would define it as a person who is obstinately or intolerantly devoted to his or her own opinions and prejudice. So that's pretty on point. I like the word obstinate in there. It's being stuck, unmovable, right? So that's the definition of someone who is bigoted or has a bigoted viewpoint. I think from there we were going to touch on. We decided to come at it with community, right? And
Yeah.
let's start with homophobia or transphobia, whichever one we'd like to go through, and how that's kind of manifested itself in our lives and how we deal with it, our thoughts about it. And so first off, I think in order to really understand what kind of bigotry can take place with these tracks, we have to define homophobia and transphobia because that's such a big, you know what I mean? Like it has so much weight to it when you talk about that in conversation.
And you know what? And honestly, per our last episode, since we even added the pronouns and identifiers, I feel like it has gotten even harder to stay in a lane of support or sacrifice or sabotage. Even by just our conversation, where you're like, look, I still love and respect and appreciate the gay community, but when it comes to this pronoun, it's just that was kind of like your thought process. So,
well,
and that's, I think,
actually, I didn't have any stance on the gay community. I didn't say anything about that. So I still have beliefs to be uncovered about that on the show, but specifically in the lane of pronouns, I don't believe in gender as a concept. So I just sort of reject that idea, which is what I expressed on the last or a couple episodes ago. But continue.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry, and by the way, she's not. I would redact my statement. We'll probably take this away in editing, and I will have a very weird redundancy. But either way, even now as I've gotten older and came out when I was like 15, I still don't really know what homophobia and transphobia really is because there are so many dimensions of it because there's political transphobia, there's digital phobia. Like there's all these ways that we can kind of show it. So I don't know if it's just because if it's something that is not supported, that's a phobia. Or are you looking at the definition too?
Yeah, I'm like writing stuff down. I'm trying to well, so
We're good.
put it in words for me. If you're gonna be consistent with the use of the word exphobia, like whatever inserts like arachnophobia, what does that
Mm-hmm.
what does that mean to you?
Oh, fear of spiders. Like I'm scared. Like I'm physically stuck. Like my body, everything shuts down. Like I'm only focusing on the emotional response that I'm getting from this visual imagery
Yeah,
or whatever.
flight, freeze, manifestation of fear, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So if we apply that to homophobia, which is what that word should mean, right? That would essentially mean
I
fear.
scare people.
Yeah, like fear of people who sort of
Yeah.
um, they practice and it's like it's obvious to you, like maybe displays of affection, right? You would have a fear of someone that behavior,
Mm-hmm.
that sort of homoerotic behavior. And I just have to say for the record, I'm not homophobic or transphobic because people don't scare me. Like I just think that's the most ridiculous thing in the world. People are like homophobia, transphobia. It's like, what are you walking around scared of these people? I don't
But
think
it's really,
actually
yeah,
mean.
that's so funny. I think it's so funny that the first word that we associated was fear, and 9 times out of 10, when we see it being used, and then maybe an image or a video associated with it, it's usually a violent one. They're not scared. Like there's not like a drag queen running around with a butcher knife being like, "Fear me!" It's not. It's more like they're being harassed or name called or mocked or anything else like that or torn down. So yeah, I think that's a really cool. I think that's an interesting take on it, and I want in the comments our viewers and listeners to kind of say, what is your view? Were you thinking of it like fear, or were you thinking of it more like harassment or prejudice?
Exclusionary tendencies. I think
Yes,
that's like
yeah,
a good way to put it. Usually it's when I think in the way that we sort of use and abuse this word, right? Homophobia,
hmm
transphobia. What they actually mean when what people are trying to say when they say this is they have some kind of fundamental disagreement about that thing, and
hmm
there are exclusionary tendencies that follow. And that can also go to the extreme end. I would say like activism in the opposite direction would be like very extreme exclusion, right? So if someone
yeah,
is homophobic, which I don't really know if that exists, to be honest with you, but if someone is like in within like the community sense like homophobic, that would mean if they're an activist, they would be like anti-gay marriage, anti, like, you know what I mean, like those kind of umbrella type things. But I don't really think homophobia, as people want to use it as like a hot button word, I don't think that exists. Like no
I think
one's
it's evolved.
okay.
Like
I would
I
agree with
think,
yes.
yeah, like I
Now,
think it's changed.
yeah.
Like how we associate it, just like any profanity that used to be anti-Semitic, we start to see how some of those phrases and sentences and whatever and even references change, they evolve. And I think once upon a time when gays and lesbians and trans really didn't have a lot of visibility, rights, and advocacy, there was a lot of that. There's a lot of phobias, and I think there was a mixture of fear and anger and just maybe lack of inclusion just because it didn't make sense to them because it was either black or white, not gray, or in many colors as we would identify with. But yeah, I think now today, I don't really think it's a phobia. I think it's a choice. I think it's a practice. It's a learned behavior. It's a facility of social construct that either continues or dismantles itself based on the opportunity for the people to choose to say, talk to a gay person, talk to a trans person, talk to a lesbian.
Yeah.
You will see nothing out of the ordinary other than what has nothing to do with you.
Well, sorry. What what do you think um what have you seen in your personal life that you would consider, let's just stick with homophobia for a second. what types of things have you experienced or seen, not about yourself, but like maybe other people that would be considered homophobic in the culture or in a community?
Believe it or not, I feel like there's even like racial homophobia because like to this day, there will be a lot of people, other gay men, and specifically in my world, that have very clear preferences around their phobias around a certain race or ethnicity or build or da da da. Like, these aren't. I don't. It's the way that it's phrased now. It's not really a. This isn't like a. This is my preference. Like, these are like, do not talk to me, or I will block you, or I will not engage with you because you are da 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 da. And I was like,
Okay. Not to like, I'm not trying to diminish your experience, but for the sake of clarity and simplicity, can we strictly keep it to homophobia and not add a racial element?
I think the only time I really see it is when there's celebration around a group gathering, and I see it from other sides, where I see it's more of the religious right, or it's more of the extremist side. And those are just all perceptions and just visuals that, you'll always see a picketer. It's gotten smaller and smaller over the years, but like that's the only phobias I've seen.
Can you
But
give an
I also don't know what it's like for gay parents. I don't know what it's like for. I just saw something recently that if you wanted to go to a sperm bank, you can technically, a gay man can't have had sex with a man for 5 years in order to donate. Um, they're making some changes, that there's a facility that's new that changes that. Um, there's still some phobias that exist that we just kind of exist within, like giving blood. It used to be a thing, but now it's not. So that's kind of what I've seen as far as like the specific around sexual orientation and identifying around that channel. That's where I've seen more consistent, unevolved phobias.
Okay. Some of the ones that you mentioned are, I mean, I really don't want to dive like too like deeply into these things
Yeah,
because
of course. Mhm.
I know for sure. I think there might be some medical basis within reason as we started to understand bloodborne pathogens that it would make sense
Mm,
for there to be more caution
regulation.
and then less over time as we come to understand it. I think that's a natural progression. And
Yeah.
I don't know if you can actually count that black and white as bigotry per se.
Uh,
Let's think of like social examples that don't necessarily have to do with a medical decision, just because we both, neither of us could really get into that realm per se.
um, well, I think homophobia, like how it's understood, felt, and even experienced, I think, again, it's subjective because I'm a black gay person, a white gay person versus an Asian gay person. They may have all different forms of that phobia based on other areas of bigotry, I guess. So I guess this is a kind of difficult way to kind of pigeonhole it, or at least give it examples that are definitive, because I'm still just one perspective, and even my visual interpretation is still not one that I can say is mine because I was a viewer of it. But what I described was how people have felt in those situations, where there may be things like this is science, this is the reason why this makes you feel like it's a phobia thing, or this is something that isn't. This is how it's misused. But it's in these settings that we can correct, guide, and advocate for a better clarity around saying, this is when you're in a moment of phobia or homophobia. This is when you're in a moment of just rules, rights, laws, regulations, and policy.
Okay. Well, so if the examples for you seem a little muddy, what if we take let's take like a really blatant example that people can probably identify with. If
Yeah.
there was kind of protest going on, you know, let's just say it was like anti gay rights or whatever, because we don't see that very often. Right now, it's anti trans rights, if you would, like people who are fighting for that kind of sort of backwards way. But I don't see a lot of people going out there like, yeah, no rights for gay men or gay women. Like that's not happening right now. So let's talk about that.
No.
um, if you saw a movement like that on the street where there were a bunch of people gathered, like we should take away gay marriage. We should, things like that. Would you consider that a homophobic behavior?
Um, in a way, yeah, because yes, and it goes into that lines that we talked about, like what that I've been trying to understand: freedom of speech, harmful speech. They both are speech, and they both are given, but like one is creating conflict, one can create connection. So what's the goal here? And I think when you think about phobias, they are there to pull apart and keep what is familiar, not what is different. So I do feel like it's again, yeah, it's pulling people apart. It's creating this tear into something that doesn't need to be torn.
Okay. So, but do you think it's phobia is still the right word to use, or would you say it's just more like a difference in belief? Like there's a fundamental
Yeah.
disagreement in values. Because I I hate the word homophobia and transphobia and X whatever phobia if we're not talking about actual fear. I feel like
But I think that's it. It's right there. It's like it's not a phobia. It's just fear and ignorance because that fear has led you to be avoidable. Like you're not going to look it up because you're scared. You don't know what it is. Because what if you find out that it was really just you? Like it really was just your poor behavior and hating these people, that regret, that feeling. That's fear. Like you don't want to sit there and feel that. So you stay in your anger or you stay in your blind point of view, like we had a conversation off air about politics and
okay,
that could have made it seem so difficult from an observer. And someone may have called me a bigot and someone may have called you a bigot for other reasons, gender, ethnicity.
mhm,
But in that dialogue, we weren't, you know, ostracizing. So I wouldn't consider like our conversation around like a phobia or even if I think it's fear. I think the word phobia is clearly medical and psychological, but when it comes to a culture or a community such as the LGBTQ, it's fear.
okay. Well, there might be a fear element of not wanting to have your belief system disrupted. I could understand that for sure. Fear,
Yeah.
anxiety, maybe around that.
Or
Um,
what that fear makes you do. That fear leads to an action, which leads to them protesting in the street and da da da.
what if do you think that a person can be um let's just for instance say against marriage, but then also still hold no ill feelings towards gay people? Do you think it's possible for someone to be opposing of gay marriage and specific things like that while still, truly and at face value, like have no ill will towards those people? Do you think
Hmm.
possibility?
And not be considered a bigot?
Well, that's a different question.
True, but I was thinking like seeing how those two correlated around phobia and bigotry, because I'm like, we're trying to take away and clarify those two meanings. But
Yeah. So I would say someone who does not believe in gay marriage,
mhm.
the claim that they are a bigot for believing that is a religious question. That's true.
Okay, okay.
How do you define marriage? Where do we get where do our underlying principles and values behind marriage and what marriage should be come from? And then at that point, where does that fit into the civil discussion of our country and the legal rights of marriage and who can that's a really big question. So
Yeah.
without getting too much into that, I guess I wasn't really trying to suggest or ask whether or not that person would be a bigot for holding those views. I was just I'm sorry, I went down the line of speech more so.
Mm,
So like
I
if
think, I mean,
those views, do you think it's possible for them to also not harbor any ill will?
of course, I think it's always possible. I mean, what you say and what you do technically don't have to live hand in hand, and usually don't, 9 times out of 10. And people who say things, and as long as they still live within that, you know what I mean? Like, I don't hate gays, but I don't believe in gay marriage. You know what I mean? Like, as long as they don't turn around and start cussing out a gay couple that is getting married or at the registry or something else like that, and now creating a different form, then yeah, you can do both. Because like it's almost the same thing. Like if you ain't got nothing nice to say, don't say it at all.
Okay. Well, it's cool that you believe that. I think that there's some people out in the world who would argue like, no, that doesn't exist. And it's like, well, no, I think it does. So that's cool. Okay. So then do you want to open up that question about the bigotry question with marriage, or do you want to move on to Um, let's see. We're also going to talk about possibly like my military experience, right?
Yeah, because I feel like this is where we would find. I mean, I would used to assume it would be just bias, and we talked a little bit about like bias around
Yeah.
how you saw yourself and the requirements, levels, and even obstacles for women versus men, and you're like, what? That's cuckoo banana cakes. Shout out to my niece who created that phrase, cuckoo banana cakes.
I love that. Okay, so with regard to like, mm, unfortunately, I'd have to stick to transphobia because recently there have been some. Well, there probably will be some changes to the military once the new president takes office.
Oh
Are you aware of
yeah.
that?
I have not heard about that, but I was like, well, what else? I mean, it does not surprise me. It is not a shock that there would be some retroactive or complete omissions of certain things that we have allowed our current serving and non-serving
Yeah.
communities have. So,
So there's actually, I think there's a very strong moral argument to support that movement that's going to take place, and maybe we can get into that in another episode. But
yeah.
the summary of it would be, to my understanding, and I haven't done a lot of research into this, that at the very least they are no longer going to accept trans people into the military. And what defines them as trans is a different ballgame. I don't know if that means like just um, self-identifying, or if you have to have had surgeries, or if you were on. I don't know
Oh,
which one of those
it's
tenets.
so post-op pre-op.
Yeah, that's so.
Mm.
Yeah, that's very tricky. I don't know the details about that, but the idea is, it's not clear that these people are at the least neutral once they enter because they present significant medical risks, unfortunately.
Well,
And
you
we,
said that before. Mhm.
yeah, we screen people when you go through MEPS. There's like a giant screening process. You could get delayed or not accepted if you ever had Ritalin for I think a period of like I'm gonna make this up. I forget what it is, but it's like if you ever took Ritalin for more than 6 months at any point in your life ever, it will disqualify you from the Navy or something like that.
Wow.
Even if
Right,
you
right.
and you're trying to join and you're 30. Like there's strict requirements about certain things. Some of that stuff also includes suicidality, and I would call it like mental health.
Like
So if
psychological eval.
yeah, if you have a history of suicidality, they have the right to turn you away because you're a health risk. Like if you're not of a sound mind and sound body, you don't need to be put in conditions that will stress you the block out and
Right,
possibly be a detriment to yourself or a detriment to others, right? That's just
right.
unsafe. It's not ideal, right? And I don't mind sort of expressing my sentiment into that territory because it's like, dude, if the bottom line is if you are going to be dead weight to your team, quite literally, because you can't hang, you're going to get them killed. It's just one of those things. Like I think we have a right to sort of weed these people out for those reasons. Not like anybody who is not mentally 100%. You know what I'm saying? Like we don't allow schizophrenic people to join. We don't allow people with these extreme mental health diagnoses into the military because they are a detriment. They are dangerous. They will get somebody else killed. It's not just your own life. So I think the medical argument for these people is strong. And if you've had any kind of surgery, top or bottom surgery, that's constant maintenance, constant, constant, constant. That the Navy didn't sign up to support.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You're gonna now have to switch your hormones over to them, which you might not be able to get a consistent supply all the time. What if you get deployed to Afghanistan? You think you're going to be able to get hormones in Afghanistan?
Right, right.
Probably not. We can hardly get people with like people who develop psoriasis or something while they're in the military. I've seen that where they came in and they were fine, but then over time they developed psoriasis. When I was on deployment, I had a guy in my shop who developed it, and he couldn't get his meds because of the type waterways we were in. It was too long
Yes.
between replenishment periods, and he was miserable. He was absolutely miserable. He couldn't like walk. He couldn't do it. It was so bad. I felt so bad for him. I wouldn't want anybody to suffer, right? And I've seen that, and it's not fun, right? And so I think there's a very strong medical argument that it's okay that we sort of discriminate against these type of people who choose to do this to themselves and then want to join the military. Like, I think that's fair, and it's kind of it's a lot to like get confronted with, but I would say when we're in the military, I don't notice transphobia. I don't see that socially. I do see discrimination though, and I think that might be the right thing.
Do you think it's a sub behavior that discrimination also includes that trans and that homophobia within it? Because now there is just one, like, it's just right, like, how people have misused homophobia, transphobia, but when you're in that particular environment and community, is that just racism? Like, they're just racist, and now gays and lesbians, trans are included within that community or subculture.
You'd have to rephrase your question. I don't quite understand what you mean.
Well, like, because you've seen racism, but you're saying that there's no form of transphobia or homophobia in the military.
Well, I don't know in the military in general. I would say there was a trans person on my ship
Mm-hmm.
who went through, actually, she was completely, well, she is a female, but she like transitioned while we were on board. So female to wanting to
Male.
identify as a man, and started in the female birthing, was on hormones, deployed, switched halfway through to the male birthing, which was wild to me. Because this person did not have surgery. So it was just hormonal transitioning, which wasn't enough
Wish
to
I
be
did.
passing by any means, but it's just one of those things. Like, I was nervous for that person. I hoped and pleaded that nothing happened to them. You know,
Mhm.
I saw disgusting things happen between males and females as far as like sexual harassment, just on the regular day to day for stereotypical heterosexual type things, right? And so
Mhm.
that's happening. Oh my goodness, like I would want nothing to happen to that person, right? And
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
male thing where like I can't go in and look and check, I can't make sure, I can't like protect or defend or do anything, and I would just hope to God that it's not happening, right? But aside from birthing, out about in the ship, I saw nothing. I saw like no mistreatment, no different treatment, no. It was all just. And maybe it was because the person transitioned with the whole crew. Like everyone knew that person as a female, and then they transitioned, and so everyone still knew them. Like maybe there was part of that, but at the same time, like I don't know. It seemed very neutral and fine. I didn't see any issues with that. Of course, my mind went there,
And,
like, oh my goodness, I'd hope nothing happened, but yeah.
and I think in that case specifically, I think it's because of how, like, the timing and like the inclusion. Because do you think it would have been different if that person, um, I mean, I don't know. Like, what if you said that you switched ships before? Like, you have to go to a different ship. You're deployed differently. You don't get to stay with the same unit. What, like, if it was a different situation like that? This. They were a biological woman, and then they transitioned into a man. But they had to switch. They had to go and experience both of those realities. Now you are identified and seen and experienced as a woman, and now you are claiming and standing in your identity as a man and wanting those to also see and experience you as such in a different but similar space like the military.
Yeah.
Would that be different? Do you think? Like, would you think that there'd be more of it?
No, the interesting thing is there's actually quite a bit of fear culture, I think, I'm speaking for myself here as far as what I would say the command climate would be at the time. But
Okay.
any given command at any given time, there's probably a lot of fear culture around accidentally mistreating somebody like that. So it would be like the mistaken use of pronouns, or not the ambiguity if you're not passing, or like there'd be a whole lot of walking on eggshells about this person, to the point that it would be more of like want to offend, and you would get that at every command. It'd be very,
Um,
very intense. So you'd actually almost have like protection in a way. Except, I mean, there's always going to be twisted individuals. That's why I expressed my sentiment in the beginning. There's always going to be those sick fucks who will mess with anybody in inappropriate ways, and no one is remiss. So
and I think and I think that's the whole point of why we thought this would be a really good way to tie it into community, because I feel like those are the bad apples that get in there,
yeah.
and then they cause the infection, and then they can captivate and create this narrative that leads us down to these exact things where we don't want any of these things to happen. We may not facilitate in the same systems that they do, but like I don't want another person to suffer in any result of their just plain simple existence. That just seems crazy to me.
Mhm.
Um, but how I facilitate and believe in how our lives intertwine, or the view of your world versus the view of mine, sure, we can have our smoke and mirrors or just detours, but I would never want your road to go away versus my road. That's just crazy. Like
Yeah.
we're all going somewhere. Um, I think I mean, I don't know about you, but I feel like these two categories, the military and the gay community, are very difficult to pin down as far as specifics around. Give me an example of a specific moment of identifiable, clear, factual transphobia or um,
Mhm.
or homophobia. So, how about this? In our current worlds that we are now in, and without something out on the outside looking in, I don't know if I could apply any phobias. Can we apply phobias to like? I mean, I don't think I can have any phobias that I can say that I've seen actively in the world, other than political phobias. I feel like there's a lot of political phobia going around, um, and I
I
think
would
it's
be really
creating.
inclined to agree with you about that. Ironically, I think phobia might be the right word for that. Mhm.
Yeah, I feel like, and that's creating.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's fueling this wheel of what we said. Like that's creating these racists, these prejudice, these activists, all this anger and conflict, and not community. But then
Yes.
they're wrapping themselves up in these bubble wraps of community, even though 10 people in conflict who all believe the same conflict exists, going after 10 people who want to resolve or create change.
Mhm.
It's like where
Yeah.
what happens. So bigotry is totally turned to different terminology. I feel like, do you feel like they're sister words and they're paired? Because I feel like we've taken these two identities around fear and bigotry.
Oh, fear and bigotry? No, I don't think those are synonymous. I think um I think they might be part of the same Venn diagram, you know,
Mm-hmm.
the roots of fear and the roots of bigotry, they might have some commonality, but I don't think they're synonymous.
Yeah, this is a lot to chew on, and I know we only have like 8 minutes before we have to get off air, but like, mm. Sarah, what do you think? I think we should dive into this more and then maybe find an area of interest that we really can kind of tie into us around
Mhm.
communicating around. Like, we did it perfectly. I feel like I'm bragging on us, but like we both have non-similar views on very divided black or white things.
Yes.
And here we are as friends and co-hosts and producers, and and we literally talk about, I don't think we've had one
Yeah.
icky observatory conversation. I feel like I've grown, I've learned, I've facilitated a completely different perspective. Though my belief is still the same, my perspective around it is now inclusive to understanding how and what exists around my non-beliefs, you know, and I don't have to disrespect it. I don't have to conflict with it. I don't even have to try to tear it down. It's not a mountain that I need to say it needs to be out of the world. So
Yeah. I
I
think
wish.
I think there's a lot of merit to what you're saying, though. The ability to sit with someone in good faith and do your best to understand their position and their belief systems and why they believe that, how they got there, and not be intolerant and not act ignorantly and irrationally and emotionally, and be able to dive into that discourse with them and understand their point, and also have a greater understanding of your own as a consequence. Like that's fantastic. And I think we are nailing that right now.
Yeah, I wish we could talk about. Maybe we'll talk about that next week, or about. I want to talk about the tarot card conversation. I want to talk about that whole journey.
Well, we can do that. But I would honestly
Just, just that in specifics, not how we dived into it deeper, but like I want to talk about how the conversation started, and then and where we landed. I think it's a perfect thing. I don't want us to talk about our political places because I feel like that's a whole season or a 2 hour segment, a special segment. But I think it's important for them to. I think I want to leave this with everybody. When was the last time you had a difficult conversation with someone of opposition with you? And how did it go? And what did you do? Not what did they do, but what did you do? Did you blow your top? Did you say our icky phrase, which is agree to disagree, and walk off? Did you try to kill the conversation and not learn to gravitate? Like, I want to know because, like, I was challenged when we had our first realm of that, and I was like, oh, well, she's still Sierra. She's still the person I'm gonna take to a bar fight. So I just know now. I just know who she is. Um, I don't know if you guys saw our post, but I'm gonna do a quick little shout out. She is now a black belt, just so everybody knows.
Yeah.
First
Well,
degree.
second black belt. Yeah. So I've got one from karate, Kempo karate already from when I was a kid. And I just got a second one in a sort of taekwondo blended bujitsu kind of program. So that was pretty cool. So now I've got two different first degree black belts. Yeah.
So basically, what she's saying is that she will kick your non like. I don't know what I was trying to say with that. I had a joke in my head, but my phone just rang. Why is
So
everyone calling me today?
only if it
Okay,
warrants defense. Otherwise,
that's not
me
one.
talk to you to death. How's
Yeah.
that?
Till next time, guys. I think it's been great. I think we're not done with this conversation. I think Sierra and I actually, I would love for us to talk more off air to kind of really just sit with it together. Um, and then I really want to put this together for everybody because I think this is a very important time to have this conversation and this dialogue around this. This is not a small talk moment for any of us as we go into mini minds melding. Um, we need to be ready to be able to face our own abilities to conversate or not conversate and how to control ourselves in those thought processes. So,
Real quick
yeah.
on that. I know in the previous episode we did say we were going to jump into a certain claim about moral responsibility surrounding bigotry, and holy moly, it's just we are always torn between do we sort of blindly hash our way through this on camera so that you guys can see the process? Or do we talk a little bit off camera and try to sort of sort and simplify our viewpoints to understand where we're coming from and then discuss it further? It's such a fine line because we always want you guys to see the process and how we conduct ourselves in these conversations. And it's hard because these episodes would be long and arduous and it would definitely lengthen the season. So we're always like walking that line. And if we miss a claim and we try to circle back to it, it's because we're still trying to figure out which thing we should do here. So for that particular one from the last episode, I think we're going to sit on it and talk more off air and simplify and understand where we're coming from and sort of try to then bring it to you guys. So it's not off the table. It's just going to be later. And then
It's just, we just got to set this table because it's going to be a pretty big meal.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And same goes
Yeah.
for we talked about so much today. I can't believe we did all that in 40 minutes. That was insane. So it's
I don't
gonna
even
be
think we did. I feel like we were a thesaurus and you were a dictionary. I was kind of like using specific words to identify. You're like, Brandon, that's not really the definitive thought process. But again, it got the juices flowing. But we did just come off a holiday. I had a great holiday. She had a great holiday. We got to see each other. It was great. So yeah, we
yeah,
got some stuff for you guys.
join us next time. We'll probably I don't want to make any claims. I don't know what we're gonna do, but I think we're gonna keep a little bit on this topic, unpack it more, and we hope you guys enjoy the ride. Buckle up. And then we will see
Yeah.
you next time.
Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all where your podcast listen to, and join our Instagram and Facebook pages at Still Podcast. I'm Brandon. This is
Sierra, and we will see you
and
guys.
bye, guys.